Hello and good day. Welcome to our video channel, God's Promises. And today's video will be Genesis 37. Let's get started now. Verse 1. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This verse sets the stage for the story. We are introduced to Jacob, who is living in the same land as his father Isaac. This land is known as Canaan. Verse 2. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. This verse provides background information about Joseph and his family. Joseph is Jacob's son, and he is described as a young man of 17. He is tending to the flocks with his brothers, who are the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. Joseph brings a bad report to his father about his brothers, which sets the stage for the conflict to come. Verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. This verse explains that Jacob, who is also called Israel, loves Joseph more than his other sons. This favoritism is due to the fact that Joseph was born to Jacob in his old age. Jacob also makes an ornate robe for Joseph, which further sets him apart from his brothers. Verse 4. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. This verse shows the jealousy and resentment that Joseph's brothers feel towards him. They hate him because their father loves him more, and they are unable to speak kindly to him. Verse 5. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. This verse introduces the first of two dreams that Joseph has. When he shares the dream with his brothers, they hate him even more. Verse 6. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had." Verse 7. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. In this dream, Joseph sees himself and his brothers binding sheaves of grain. His sheaf rises and stands upright, while his brothers' sheaves gather around it and bow down to it. Verse 8. His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. This verse shows the reaction of Joseph's brothers to his dream. They interpret the dream as a sign that Joseph intends to rule over them, and their hatred towards him grows even stronger. Verse 9. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." This verse introduces Joseph's second dream, in which the sun, moon, and 11 stars, representing his father and brothers, bow down to him. Verse 10. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" This verse shows that Jacob is not pleased with Joseph's dreams, as he interprets them as a sign that he, his wife, and his brothers will bow down to Joseph. This further fuels the jealousy and resentment that Joseph's brothers feel towards him. Verse 11. His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. This verse emphasizes the jealousy of Joseph's brothers towards him, while also indicating that Jacob is keeping the matter in mind. Verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. This verse sets the scene for the next part of the story. Joseph's brothers are grazing their father's flocks near Shechem. Verse 13. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. This verse shows that Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers who are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Joseph agrees to go. Verse 14. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, this verse further explains the purpose of Joseph's journey to Shechem, which is to check on his brothers and the flocks. Joseph is sent off from the valley of Hebron and arrives at Shechem. Verse 15. A man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" This verse introduces a man who finds Joseph wandering around in the fields and asks him what he is looking for. Verse 16. He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" Joseph responds that he is looking for his brothers and asks the man if he knows where they are grazing their flocks. Verse 17. "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. The man tells Joseph that his brothers have moved on to Dothan, so Joseph goes after them and finds them there. Verse 18. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. This verse shows the extent of Joseph's brothers' jealousy and resentment towards him. They see him approaching from a distance and plot to kill him. Verse 19. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. The brothers refer to Joseph as a dreamer, emphasizing their disdain for him. Verse 20. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." This verse shows the brothers plan to kill Joseph and cover up the murder by saying that a wild animal devoured him. They mock Joseph's dreams and do not want them to come true. Verse 21. So when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. Reuben, one of Joseph's brothers, tries to intervene and prevent the murder from taking place. Verse 22. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. Reuben suggests throwing Joseph into a cistern instead of killing him, with the intention of rescuing him later and taking him back to their father. Verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing. This verse shows that when Joseph arrived, his brothers stripped him of his ornate robe, which was a symbol of Jacob's favoritism towards Joseph. Verse 24. And they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Joseph's brothers carry out Reuben's plan and throw Joseph into the cistern. Verse 25. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. While Joseph is in the cistern, his brothers sit down to eat and see a caravan of Ishmaelites approaching. The caravan is on its way to Egypt with a load of spices, balm, and myrrh. Verse 26. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood?" Judah questions the wisdom of killing Joseph and suggests that they sell him to the Ishmaelites instead. Verse 27. "Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. The brothers agreed to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites instead of killing him. Verse 28. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Joseph's brothers pull him out of the cistern and sell him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. The Ishmaelites then take Joseph to Egypt. Verse 29. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. Reuben returns to the cistern to rescue Joseph, but finds that he is not there. He tears his clothes in grief. Verse 30. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Reuben tells his brothers that Joseph is not in the cistern and expresses his distress. Verse 31. Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. Joseph's brothers take his robe and use it to deceive Jacob. They slaughter a goat and dip the robe in the blood, making it appear that Joseph was killed by a wild animal. Verse 32. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." Joseph's brothers take the bloodied robe back to Jacob and ask him to identify whether it belongs to Joseph. Verse 33. He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him." Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. Jacob is convinced that Joseph has been killed by a wild animal, based on the evidence of the bloodied robe. Verse 34. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and mourned for his son many days. Jacob grieves deeply for his son, tearing his clothes and wearing sackcloth as a sign of mourning. Verse 35. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for many days. Jacob's other children try to comfort him, but he refuses to be consoled, insisting that he will continue to grieve until he joins his son in death. Verse 36. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. The Ishmaelites sell Joseph to Potiphar, who is one of Pharaoh's officials and the captain of the guard in Egypt. Meaning and symbolism. This chapter in Genesis is significant in many ways. It highlights the story of Joseph, who is the 11th son of Jacob and the first son of Rachel. Joseph is Jacob's favorite son, and he receives preferential treatment, which causes resentment among his brothers. Joseph's brothers are jealous of him, and this jealousy leads them to plot against him. The story of Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers has several symbolic meanings. First, it serves as a warning against the destructive nature of envy and jealousy. It shows how jealousy can lead people to take extreme measures, like plotting to harm or even kill others. Second, it demonstrates how God can use even the most difficult circumstances to accomplish His purposes. Joseph's time in Egypt prepares him to become a powerful leader and save his family from famine. The story of Joseph also foreshadows the story of Jesus. Joseph is betrayed by his own family, sold for a small price, and then rises to power to save many people. Similarly, Jesus is betrayed by one of his own disciples, sold for 30 pieces of silver, and then rises to save all who believe in him. In addition to these symbolic meanings, this chapter also reveals important details about the characters in the story. It shows the deep love that Jacob had for Joseph, the envy that Joseph's brothers felt towards him, and the cunning nature of Judah. It also shows the power of God's providence, as he uses the evil intentions of Joseph's brothers to bring about a greater good. Overall, Genesis 37 is a powerful and important chapter in the Bible, which serves as a reminder of the dangers of envy and the faithfulness of God. Thank you for watching. Please share with us your favorite Bible verse below in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, it really does help our channel grow. Looking forward to see you back here for our next video. Always take good care.